Hello, everyone. Welcome to Yeah, I Said It. I have some good information to share. They took my video down. I tried twice, so I figured I'll go to another channel and see what's up. So, if they don't let me post it, then I will be going online and I will be doing a slide. So, let's see if they will let me play it over here. Okay. Share screen. Let's share my screen. Audio. I hope everybody is having a great weekend. About to be a new week. Okay, here we go right here. And I have to put you guys on mute. So I hope you enjoy. Let me see. Okay, showing that I'm live. Enjoy. Let's see if they take it off. Let's go. Oh, wait a minute. All right, mute.
Very high levels of radiation dose to the entire body in a very short period. This is called acute radiation syndrome. Hey guys, I'm Brian Nett from HowRadiologyWorks.com, where we have bite-sized content for those in the radiology field, especially technologists. If that sounds good to you, click below on subscribe and then click on the little bell icon so you can get notified when we release new content. And then specifically today, we're going to be talking about the 3 different outcomes which can occur, and they depend on the different levels of dose which you could have to your body. At the highest level, you're going to have issues and you're going to have death due to the fluid building up in your brain, in your brainstem. At intermediate doses, at this very high level for acute radiation syndrome, we're going to be talking about GI effects. And then we're going to be talking about effects to the bone marrow, which you can survive from these effects. Whereas the first 2 cases, they are going to be deadly in just a matter of days in general. So again, this is Brian Nett, and we're starting now on acute radiation syndrome. So acute radiation syndrome, there's a few things that are necessary for acute radiation syndrome. It has to be a large dose. So at least 0.7 gray is the approximate dose before you'll see symptoms of acute radiation syndrome. And then anything above that in terms of higher radiation doses. Typically external, very penetrating radiations, such as neutrons, gamma rays, high energy X-rays. These can all lead to acute radiation syndrome. In acute radiation syndrome, the entire body receives the dose. So if your hand or your finger receives a very high radiation dose, you wouldn't necessarily have the same effects of acute radiation syndrome that we're going to talk about here today. So acute radiation syndrome occurs mostly in areas where the whole body has been irradiated. For instance, a radiation worker in a nuclear accident or after an atomic bomb. And this dose happens quickly. So this dose is given all in the matter of either seconds or minutes. And this is often the case in these situations. So we're going to go through 3 different types of acute radiation syndrome with increasing radiation dose. And unfortunately, the mortality is even worse for each one. So in the case of the first one, we're talking about bone marrow syndrome. So first off, all the blood products are actually made in the bone marrow, inside of the bones. And the blood products actually start off as stem cells. So those stem cells, they can become the different types of blood products, and they're constantly being remade inside the body. So in a normal, healthy person, you have 10 to the 11th to 10 to the 12th cells being made every day. New blood cells being made every day to replenish the supply. So if something happens, such as a full body irradiation, where this is irradiated, if something happens, in that case, we're going to have significant health consequences. And full body irradiation prevents those blood cells from being remade effectively, and the effects actually depend on the dose. So for very low doses, like we said in the last slide, down to doses as low as 0.7 gray, you can see effects of the bone marrow syndrome. But up to about 2 gray is what we call lethal dose to 0% of the population. So you're very unlikely to die if you have a radiation dose of up to 2 gray in one of these short time windows like we're talking about. That's LD0. LD50 is around 5 gray. So LD50 is around 5 gray. So about 50% of the population will die if given an exposure to 5 gray. And then LD100 is about 8 gray. So 8 gray and above, basically 100% of the population will die of bone marrow syndrome if they don't die of something else sooner. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next 2 slides, are syndromes which are actually worse in magnitude and which hit quicker. So again, full body irradiation, the problem here is that the blood supply cannot properly be replenished because those stem cells cannot be converted into the blood products. And then after that, at doses that are higher than what we talked about there, the range there was in the single digits of gray, and grays that are basically in the double digits, so 10 up to 100 gray, that's where gastrointestinal syndrome is the most problematic. So in bone marrow syndrome, we're talking about 30 to 60 days for death to occur in individuals that do end up dying. In gastrointestinal syndrome, we're actually talking about only about 10 days from the time at which the accident occurs, to the time at which the exposure occurs, until the individual ends up dying. And the cause here is inside of the gut, inside of the intestine. If here's just a schematic of the intestine, and then inside of the intestine, there's linings and there's crypts, which are these small areas where there's basically indentations within the gut. And then there's a mucosal membrane, which is going over all of the inside of the gut. And that mucosal membrane is also, just like the blood cells we talked about, that mucosal membrane is also being replenished constantly. And because those cells die and are not able to be replenished, this is why GI syndrome leads to vomiting and diarrhea and is typically fatal, because the patients typically continue to have these symptoms of vomiting and diarrhea and have trouble even keeping proper water in the body. And so a GI syndrome, while relatively rare because of the higher doses, this is fatal. And if you have a radiation dose above 10 gray, the GI syndrome will be fatal, and it will be fatal within about 10 days. Finally, the absolute worst of these cases, which is actually the least well known, is called cerebrovascular syndrome. And then sometimes it's also referred to as a central nervous syndrome, or CNS. It's more appropriately called a cerebrovascular syndrome because it has to do with the vasculature in the brain and not just the neurons in the brain. So if the cord itself, if you only irradiated the brainstem, even at these doses, you would not have the same effect. So it has to do with the full body irradiation and the effect on the cerebrovascular system. And this effect on the cerebrovascular system, this breakdown of the cerebrovascular system leads to increased fluid within the brain. And that increased fluid within the brain, it's a rigid skull. So that increased fluid within the brain leads to higher pressures. And those higher pressures, again, similar symptoms, vomiting, diarrhea, disorientation, ability to hold your balance. This is fatal within 1 to 3 days. And again, this is doses. There have been cases reported down to 80 gray, but typically it's just specified as about 100 gray and higher for the cerebrovascular syndrome. Next, check out our video on the damage of radiation to DNA.
Oh, I did good over here. They did. They did my video, so I definitely got to go to my other channel and post this. This is awesome. That was very good information. Good information. I don't want to. All I'm gonna I keep myself out of my rooms. It's compatible to um, the universal situation. So the situation that we have going on for the last 2 years, and the symptoms from this acute radiation is the same. And they are putting up 5G. So y'all keep thinking it's cute. But the ones who had that God DNA, we're just gonna recycle. But I've been saying it for years, like in the 90s, we're gonna burn. We already done what? The earth been flooded. Is what else is it? There's only a certain amount of elements, you know. So yeah, some burning up in here on this planet. So, let me stop. But you guys stay safe and hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time.